just a reminder, I am a complete novice at video editing. I am literally just figuring this out now, how to do it on my computer, because before I did like a 20-minute long video on my phone, like edited everything, and that was really miserable. So all that to say, I'm just figuring this out. So if the quality isn't the best, I'm hoping it will improve over time incrementally as I keep making videos. So thanks again. So one of the topics that I have personally found very challenging but also interesting as I've been on this extended road trip, you can call it that, or long-term camping trip, living in this van, is the idea of minimalism. And being in this really small van that is a bit narrower than a Volkswagen bus and a bit shorter than a Volkswagen bus marginally, it's quite small. And so that's all just been stuff that I've been struggling through for the past 7+ months, and it's been great. It's been a good learning experience. So before this, when I was in the Army, I was stationed at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington. So I lived in Olympia, Washington, which was a nice place to live, especially in the summer. And I actually lived in a campground in a small 18-foot travel trailer, like the kind you go camping in. And so I didn't have a lot per se, like in the conventional sense of having a lot of stuff. But I mean, compared to the rest of the world, I'm still in the top 1% of all of these material possessions I have. And it's still a lot. So this has still been an adjustment for me, to say the least. So I've written some articles just on my thoughts on minimalism in general and kind of the process that I've gone through in figuring out what I need versus what I want. And I'm working on one final article that includes kind of some suggestions for actual items that I've used that I found helpful. And beyond that, though, it's been more idea-based. So I kind of want to unpack some of this stuff and make videos out of all of it, because I've gotten some pretty positive feedback from the other videos I've been working on, and this has been kind of fun. So I'm just going to dig into some of this minimalism stuff via video as well. So living in approximately 40 square feet of space with another person has really illuminated what the word need actually means to me. I think pretty much every day, any of us could catch ourselves personally saying, oh, I need this, I need that. And you hear your friends and family members saying, oh, we need this thing, we need this newest electronic thing, we need this newest article of clothing. And it's just interesting to observe, both in myself and other people, how casually we kind of throw around this word need. Like, do we actually need this? What does need actually mean versus want? I mean, in many ways, it seems like our worlds, especially in the West and in developed countries, revolve around our material possessions in a lot of ways. But I didn't actually think about, well, I take that back. I have thought about minimalism a lot, and I've thought about what can I live without, and I've gone down the whole tiny house rabbit hole and the van life rabbit hole for years now. So me finally being able to do this has been a long time coming. And then my last 3+ years in the Army, living in a small trailer, that definitely was kind of like a stepping stone to this lifestyle. So I have been thinking about it for a while. And what I've kind of discovered is that if you really think about, the word need and the things you absolutely cannot live without, you'll find that honestly the list is pretty short. So even though I had this stint of 3+ years living in the small trailer, moving in the van, which was, 1/4 of that space, considerably smaller, has definitely brought up a lot of these questions and these thoughts to me once again, and I've kind of slowly continued evolving. And something that I've thought about for a while is that our attachment to all of these material possessions, that is objectively one of the primary contributing factors to our perpetual indentured servitude. And it's like, doesn't anything about that just seem insane? Absolutely insane. We literally write the check to give away our freedom by allowing ourselves to be consumed with material items. And it may sound crazy if you break it down the way I'm doing it now. At least it sounds crazy to me. I don't know about you, but it's really not that crazy if you look at all of our upbringings and what we've been surrounded with our entire lives. A lot of this seems to be a consequence of the society we live in. So, I mean, from the time you're very little, you're bombarded with advertisements, whether it be, physical signs outside or some dude dancing with a sign, or on the radio or on the television or on the internet or on social media. And it's really interesting how it's like a constant bombardment of trying to sell you stuff and convincing you why you need this stuff. And then on top of that, all of this is kind of portrayed as one big status and prestige competition. So it's like, oh, I have more money, I have a nicer car, I have a bigger house, look at all these name brand new clothes I have. And it really, we get caught up in it because it's just so easy just to get into this routine, this kind of lull of going through the motions. But when you stop for a second and back up and like look at this whole thing, it is pretty nauseating. And I think one of the most disappointing things about it is that there is a deliberate, concerted effort to distract all of us from living fulfilling, meaningful lives, and instead just become, split in a 1,000 different directions with working so hard and making all this money and chasing these titles and pursuing these degrees and then buying all these nice things and then starting the cycle over with your kids. And then before you know it, it's like, well, my life is over. Here's what I have to show for it. And while, I know that there are companies out there, particular small companies, who are creating products to try to meet a specific need in society, and that is their reason for doing it. I would say, generally speaking, that all of this, the bombardment of advertisements, the portrayal of all of this as a status competition, climbing the ladder, all of that is not coming from a place of altruism. So at the end of the day, you can choose to participate in this game, or you can do your best to try and free yourself, whatever that looks like for you personally, and not participate. No, I don't think it's practical or feasible or realistic for every human being to get rid of all their earthly possessions and only have the clothes on their back and live a monk-like lifestyle. Like, I know that's not practical, but ultimately the choice is yours in how you do this. And for me, what that looks like is just trying to be more conscious of what I'm buying and what I'm spending my money on, and trying to focus on what I have versus what I want, because it's just human nature. And so nobody's perfect, and we all fall into the trap of wanting more. But if you're able to focus all of your attention on what you do have, then you're not distracted by all these other things telling you what you should have. I would like to work towards a more healthy perspective and mindset when it comes to material possessions. And I think overall, my point is, especially if you're doing this kind of mobile van or RV living lifestyle, is that you need a lot less than you might think. I am learning this now more than ever. Like I said before, I lived in that 18-foot travel trailer. I didn't have a lot of stuff. And I was like, oh, I already have this minimalism thing down. Like, this is going to be easy. Yeah, I was really wrong. So this was exacerbated by the fact that we didn't complete the van build before we left because of logistical reasons. So instead of having the build done and then having everything in its place and stored properly and neatly before we left, it was more like, hey, here's the van. It's starting to get cold and rainy and wet in the Pacific Northwest. So let's throw everything we think we might need in the van and then get to California and the Southwest and find places to work on it while we're mobile. So just to give you an idea of how difficult of a learning experience this has been, I have donated so much stuff. and I have mailed home multiple boxes. And it's funny because there's been multiple instances where the shipping, the postage has cost more than the items were actually worth in the box. But because they were sentimental or there was something that was super valuable to me, I was like, okay, I need this. I'm going to keep it. And it is, though, one of those moments that really makes you sit there and think, like, if I donated this or gave this away, I would be actually saving money as opposed to trying to save the item and mail it home. So anyway, lots of trips to Goodwill, lots of trips to UPS, and a lot of, wow, I can't believe I brought this with me, or I can't believe I thought I would need this. And what was probably the most difficult was when I just straight up threw things away, where they had no value to be donated and there was really no point in sending it home. So I went to the dumpster, and that was especially more difficult because I was like, oh, I might use this. I might need this. And I think that's one of the difficulties that people have when they're trying to get rid of stuff. It's always this little voice in the back of your head that's like, you know what? I could make something out of this. I could use this for X, Y, or Z. And the reality is, if you haven't used it in 6 months, you're probably not going to use it. If you want to be safe, if you haven't used it in a year and it's been in a box, then you're probably not going to use it. And so on the back end, after it's gone, I don't miss it. I feel so much freedom in not having to sort through and sift through endless piles of clutter and crap and just have open space to exist. And then it enables me to actually better organize the stuff that I am holding on to, which makes living less chaotic and makes the whole experience more enjoyable and practical. So something to consider: with owning more things comes more responsibility. There's financial burden to pay for the thing. There's time, effort, and additional money to maintain the thing. And then there's space that you need to store the thing. And there's guilt if you don't use the thing. And if or when you finally come to your senses and you're like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this thing, again, it takes time and effort to do that. To whether it's selling it on OfferUp or Craigslist, whether it's taking it to a donation Dropbox, whatever it is, it still requires you to input time and effort to get rid of that thing. And then finally, you feel probably a sense of frustration and regret for how little you used this thing. And now imagine if you just never had the thing to begin with. And now multiply this exact scenario by 100, and you can kind of start to visualize the impact that radical minimalism can have on your life. I hear a logging truck, I think. So I'm well aware that all of this information seems pretty obvious. It's common sense, right? We all know a lot of these things, and it's obviously not new information. But oddly enough, knowing that to be the case, somehow we all still struggle with this stuff. And why? Why does the average American have thousands of dollars of debt, but so much stuff in their garage that they physically cannot park their car in it, or worse yet, they need a storage unit? Now, if this is you, I understand people have their reasons for what they do. I am merely trying to highlight how this just seems like alarmingly contradictory. And I think it's because none of this is easy, and there are a ton of environmental factors that are deliberately placed in our way to make us have a mindset that is just the opposite of minimalism. So if you want to go down this path, I would just start now. Don't wait. There's no reason to wait until you live in a smaller home, or maybe you don't want to live in a smaller home, or there's no reason to wait until you live in an RV or a van. You don't need to. You can start now and start small. What it would look like is going to your garage or your attic and start going through one box a day and looking at things like, hey, I haven't used this or seen it in 10 years. Why do I have this? And it forces you to take a hard look at yourself and your attachments to things and how you hold on to things. And you've got to come at it from an objective standpoint, not emotional, for sure, because emotions are what drive a lot of these attachments to these things. And the longer you wait to start on this, the more difficult it will become, because you'll accumulate even more stuff as you wait. All of these things have a tendency to kind of weigh you down like an anchor, but once you start shedding them, then you can sail freely, unburdened. And when you leave behind the things you don't need, you'll find that you have more time, more mental and emotional energy. You'll find that you have the ability to actually devote your energy and effort towards things that actually matter to you. And again, I'm not suggesting that you get rid of all your earthly possessions. I realize that that simply isn't realistic. But what I am saying is that it's really indisputable that our human obsession with the superficial has caused everything that's really important to deteriorate and kind of fade away. So I think somewhere there's a balance between the two. In future videos on the topic of minimalism, I'm going to go into some things that I learned that I didn't expect as I was about 5 months into the van living situation, and then I'll have 2 more videos, or maybe it'll end up being more, but I'm going to break down a lot of the actual practically applicable and actionable things that I've learned so far. So I hope this is helpful to some of you if you're considering this lifestyle, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen.